All right. So what did you think about the battles of the wilderness and Spotsylvania and all that good stuff all the way up until the very end?
Well, for me, it was a bloody affair. There's no getting around it. But as we said earlier, there's really no way to finish it out. It was gonna be a bloody affair, and to give Grant the total credit, if you will, for the
Mhm.
bloody affair, I don't think that's the right thing. Um,
No.
he had to press the attack. He had to press in order to find the victory. And one of the
Mhm.
things I really took out of this is, it's at this point that all of the prisoner exchanges are also done
Excellent.
because
Yeah.
the Confederate numbers, the army is just starting to dwindle. And we talked about their desertion rates are starting
Mhm.
to skyrocket at this point.
Yep.
And it was somewhere around the beginning of 1865 that they had somewhere around 2/3 of their army had deserted. And I just think that is astounding. That huge number of whether it's, are they leaving just to go work the farm? Are they leaving because they don't believe in the cause? My classroom, I was reading this as we were covering it in class.
Yeah.
And so it was really interesting. We had some good discussions in my classroom about what do you think the reasoning was? Why is it that this army's all left? But the real reason is, to me, is Grant is pushing forward and
Mhm.
everybody's starting to see the writing on the wall. I mean, it's done.
Right.
And so the prisoner exchanges have been done. And we also start to see, and this one baffles me, that the Confederacy is now starting to think about using African Americans, these former the slaves that are left in the army. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking to myself, what in your right mind would make you think they're going to want to fight for you?
Well, and wasn't it Robert E. Lee the one who proposed that because he knew how just hampered they were by lack of troops.
It
He's
was
the
dead.
one that came up with this. And Jefferson Davis was like, well, what? You know what I mean? And there were even when word of that came out that he was proposing this, he was really skewered in a
Yeah.
lot of different newspapers. They're like, wait, our glorious general, what is he mad? Is he losing his mind? Has his rheumatism, which was a
Yeah.
heart attack. Back then they didn't know they didn't know what heart attacks were. Because he was quite sick at different times. They were like, what is going on? He's the one that
Well,
proposed it.
and I think at the end here, it's the second time he proposed it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Didn't he propose it earlier and they totally just no way? And
Yeah.
then the
Yeah.
second time, like you said, the newspapers really got on him.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I'm just, why in the world would you think they would want to? This is like Hail Mary time. He's throwing up Hail Marys here. Anything
Yeah.
to get soldiers back on the battlefield.
You know what I think it is, Bill? I think it was this mentality that a lot of white Southern landowners and, slave owners had, that they actually thought slavery was a good thing for the slaves, for the African American people. Like it was a kind thing. So
Yeah.
so maybe he was thinking, well, they'll want to fight for their homes, because we take care of them. It's like,
Yeah.
I
Okay.
don't know.
So I'm going to have to take a time out because I'm also reading Gone with the Wind right now. Oh my gosh. And this morning we're outside of Atlanta and the Union Sherman's coming in and the slaves are going off to dig the new rifle pits and everything.
Yeah.
And in the book, she's got them as happy and all of this. And I'm like, are you kidding me? All right. It just kind of went along with,
No,
the
that's
age. And I'm just like, that's the lost cause mentality right there.
yes.
You know what I
That
mean?
is so funny. Let me just mention this as an aside, and I think the viewers might enjoy this. You mentioned that you got into the Civil War history through John Jakes' North and South trilogy. I think so did I. And recently I was telling Martine that I was like, I loved that miniseries back in the day. I had it on VHS. That's what really catapulted, Patrick Swayze to stardom. And she goes, well, what can I get you for your birthday? Because my birthday's coming up this month. And I was like, I've been looking around for a Blu-ray of that, but they don't have it on Blu-ray. She goes, I can digitally download that on HD. But it's $40 per season. And I was like, well, So guess what? We started watching North and South just a few nights ago. And I hadn't watched it in years. And oh my goodness, talk about everything is so dated in certain things. Like, yeah, how did the Maines really, apparently their slaves were very happy on the plantation, like
Yeah.
we're rolling our eyes at some of these portrayals of African-American people. And I'm like, oh my God, this is
But to the show's credit, the sister up north,
Virgilia.
Virgilia calls them out on that.
She did. Played by none other than Kirstie Alley. She was fantastic. Oh, we're having a great time rewatching this series. I highly recommend it. And you should watch it again, Bill. I think you'll really enjoy it.
Yep.
Just anyway, so just to go in with that, yeah, it wasn't just a happy, people wanted to be free, as people want to be free everywhere in any age and time. Okay, so having said that, yeah, so Lee is proposing arming the slaves to help the Southern cause, and obviously that does not take off. Society.
Okay. Let me add into that real fast, because I wanted to make sure the viewers who are not, if you're not familiar with Civil War, what all's going on at this point. So we've got Grant, who's driving south from DC, driving south through Virginia towards southern Virginia, towards Richmond, and kind of wrapping around the southern end of Virginia. He has sent Phil Sheridan out to the Shenandoah Valley, and he's burning and pillaging that. You've got from the south moving north is Sherman. He has in just before the election of 1864, he has captured Atlanta. He has taken, and then by Christmas, he's taken Savannah, and then he starts moving north through South Carolina, and he is kind of parked in North Carolina with two jobs, making sure that Lee doesn't escape going south and making sure that Johnston doesn't come join him from the south. He's kind of got a dual role there. And the Union blockade is fully in effect at this point, and everything's shut down. So not only do we have this lack of soldiers for the Confederate Army because they're either dying, they're in prison, they've ran away, multiple reasons. But I also wanted to point out in chapter 17, he starts giving us some of the economic repercussions of this. Yeah. And on page 341, he's talking about over the winter of 1864-65, the prices in Richmond. And so this is just kind of adding to the issue. And the reason this one hit me so much is obviously what we're going through right now in our own economy with, supply chains and all that kind of stuff.
Inflation.
So, yep. Inflation, major inflation. So on January 12th, they were paying $6 a pound for beef, which remember that is 1865, not 2022.
Right.
That's a lot of money at that time.
Yes.
Meal was $80 a bushel. White beans was $5 a quart or $160 a bushel. January 13th. So this is just that next day. Flour is sitting at $1,000 a barrel. On January 18th, so 5 days later, it's up to $1,250 a barrel. Yeah. So when you talk about inflation, we're talking crippling inflation. March of 1865, $70 Confederate money is the equivalent of $1 gold for the Union. And I mean, it is crippling. And if you are sitting in Virginia, I don't see how anybody could possibly think they could still win the war.
Right.
I guess that's my big statement there. I don't know how they think they could even win it.
Yeah, because his troops were starving at that point, were they not?
Yeah.
He kept writing to the War Department. Lee did, saying we have no salt meat, we have no, nor corn. The writing was on the wall. I think. I think it just took that one final push when his lines were broken at Petersburg, and they had to start retreating in full flight. That's when everyone was like, that now it's over, and Davis had to flee, and they were trying to take all the papers out of Richmond. And
how demoralizing would it be? Because when they broke out of Petersburg, and correct me if I'm wrong, I hope I get this right, but
Mhm.
when they left, they were trying to go catch a train that was supposed to have supplies on it. And
Yes.
the Union had captured that or
I think
burned it.
Sheridan's cavalry had,
Is that who it was?
I think it was the cavalry had pretty much cut them off.
Yeah. And so, he's going with, his soldiers have this expectation, hey, we're going to get to eat dinner, and there's no dinner.
Yeah. So yeah,
And
after that,
being hungry is
it
never
was
fun.
more of a humanitarian like mercy mission of I
Mhm.
think the quote was something that Lee said, I think I must send a letter to General Grant, and I'd rather die 1,000 deaths or something like this, because he's basically trying to see what are your terms,
Mhm.
and at first his first indication was when Grant wrote back and said, well, you need to lay down your arms, and
You're done.
and then Lee's like, well, I'm not quite ready yet. I'm not ready yet to surrender. But then he realized, I can't feed my men. They're starving. They're deserting. They were basically hemorrhaging off and running off into the countryside. So then you have Appomattox, right? And that was a very stellar moment of, well, I don't know. You know what? Guelzo kind of portrays Lee. I thought Lee was really glammed up for that. But he kind of says that he kind of wore a very simple, he wasn't overly adorned. He did have his dress sword, he did have his correct, insignia and everything else. But I think he was far, in appearance wise, much, I think he wore his cleanest uniform, and Grant just kind of showed up muddy and apologized for his appearance.
That's probably why he looked good, is just because Grant looked that bad.
Grant came right,
hadn't cleaned himself up yet.
Well, that's why I love Grant. He was out there working. He's out
a
there
working-
working.
Yep.
I got mud on. I mean, that's because I'm riding. I'm going from here to there. Anyway. So he surrenders, and it's, I think it breaks him mentally and probably physically. I think he wasn't long for the world, especially after he had like, how many heart attacks did he have? Like 2 or 3 by that time?
There was a few, because he has another one. There's at least 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then that what he ended up dying from?
He slipped. I think it was a stroke.
A stroke. Okay.
I think he stroked, and obviously just a strain on his body of all those heart attacks. But he had a stroke, and now we're really fast forwarding. But well, let's move into his. Okay, so this was a big question for Bill and I and our buddy Reed. The aftermath of the Civil War after Lee's surrender. Jefferson Davis goes on the run. He's eventually caught. Joseph Johnston surrenders shortly after to Sherman. And pretty much that's, and then in fits and starts in different little areas, the rest of the holdouts surrender as well. But those are the biggies, right? It's just Lee, Johnston, and then Davis. And then it's just it happens all so quickly. Like Lincoln had a beautiful vision that we never got to see how he would have handled the peace. We saw how he handled the war, but we didn't see how he was going to handle the peace. We have indications of how he was going to handle it, which was, like you said, Bill, let him up easy, right?
New book out by John Avlon. Lincoln and
the struggle for, I read it.
Struggle for Peace. I did too. I just got done with it this morning. And that was his main message, was Lincoln was let him up easy.
Yes.
Let him up easy.
Yep.
So anyway, sorry.
That's great.
That book.
That a little plug for that book. It was a fantastic book. I highly recommend it too. But then he was assassinated so quickly after, all of that happened. And, there were a lot of people questioning whether Davis and Lee should have been put on trial for treason and executed.
And Guelzo's one of them. He's one of them that struggles with that. And so I wanted to go back to the very beginning. So this is actually perfect time for this.
Okay.
The very beginning of the book, in the prologue.
Yeah.
Let me read just the opening lines, if you let me do that.
Absolutely.
So this book began in 2014 in what now seems like almost another world, with a single question: how do you write a biography of someone who commits treason? The question is complicated because the usual task of the biographer is to perpetuate a man as he was in the days he lived, a spring task of bringing to life again, constantly threatened by unseasonable freezes. What my question suggests is that there may be some lives that we hesitate to perpetuate, and among the reasons for that hesitation must surely be treason. In the case of Robert Edward Lee, this turns out to be an even more serious hesitation. Being a Yankee from Yankee land, it has always seemed to me that the treason Lee committed was aggravated by the nature of the cause for which he committed it, the protection of legalized human slavery. And that rankles me to the soul of my abolitionist boots. So I'll stop reading there. I absolutely love that line, though.
Yeah, no,
So,
absolutely.
Guelzo himself, as he's writing this, he is struggling the entire time, and you get that. Or I felt that I got that through. I don't know if you felt that, but I get that through the whole book, where you talked about how Lee is a man of contradictions, and what do we do with that? And Guelzo went through that exact same thing as he was trying to write this book. Is how do I handle this?
Yeah.
So I just thought that was interesting how he put that.
Well, I think it goes to the heart of it. It's like some contradictions you can never, it's like squaring a circle or whatever. You know what I mean? I think at some point you have to come to a place of acceptance of I cannot make 1 + 1 = 2 in this case. At first we can't get it. We can't get to the heart of it. I mean, if we had more time with Lee, or if other people had plumbed his mind more, he's a mystery and he's so many contradictions. And what I loved about the prologue too, and I highly recommend anyone who reads this book to really study the prologue, is he mentioned some of the books that have been put out about Lee over the years. And I remember one of my first anti-Lee book that really set the pace for me and really shook me was The Marble Man, Robert E. Lee and His Image in American Society, by Thomas L. Connolly. That was written in 1977. But that basically, it seized upon the Lee and his contradictions, that, and it says here, but casting Lee in contradiction as either saint or sinner, as either simple or pathological, is in the end less profitable than seeing his anxieties as a counterpoint to his dignity, his impatience and his temper as the match to his composure. So I guess in a way we're kind of saying that, there's the good and the bad, right? You got to take all of it. There was a lot of bad, but there was some good too, but there was a lot of bad, and treason being one of them. So after the surrender, and he goes back home, and he's kind of waiting to see what they're going to do with him. And he finds out that, they're going to pardon him as per the agreement that, the treaty, or, what they signed at Appomattox. And he was very appreciative of Grant giving him such gracious terms that men could just take a sidearm, to go home, and a horse to go and plant, and to shoot the birds, and, something to go home and that was it. But a lot of people are like, why? I don't know. You tell me what you thought. Because I think in the end, what happened with the country and with the treason thing, like, obviously there's some other folks out there on BookTube that are very adamant about. I know at one point I did say that I thought Davis and Lee should have been tried for treason and probably, hanged or shot or something. I think I've tempered it a bit now, just because, I've told you this in a message with you, Bill, that I think Lee should have been in prison and stayed in prison for a very long time. Lee never served a day in prison. Jefferson Davis did, in a very unpleasant place. I think it was someplace out on an island, and there's cold, damp.
The dry tortugas?
I think so. Yeah. He was, at least he had some type of imprisonment, incarceration.
He was.
All I know is it was someplace like that. I think it might have been. It was off the coast. But Lee never did. And what happens to Lee as he's trying to figure out his transition to civilian life, and how is he going to make income? And and all this kind of stuff is, you know, he's approached to be a president of a small college in, was it Kentucky? I think it was
Where
Kentucky.
was it?
Where is Washington College?
I think it was like Maryland or West Virginia, right in
Or
that
West
area.
Virginia. That's what it was.
Yeah,
I think it was West Virginia.
yeah.
So he becomes president of a college, and Guelzo calls it out in the book like that was an odd choice. Because you're actually, you know, you're teaching a new generation of a young generation, you know, and I think it was it it wasn't quite liberal arts, but I think he was trying to invoke more like, you know, he wanted more vocational classes and things like this. And
Well, and it sounded like it sounded like the school, first of all, was going to go under.
yeah.
It was not doing well. And a lot of the schools in that time period, a lot of the colleges were not doing well. A lot of them did go under.
Mhm.
And they grabbed him as a namesake. I don't even think they wanted, if I remember right, they didn't even really want him to do anything. It's just, can we just have your name
Yeah,
as
I think,
president? We'll do everything. And that was kind of the agreement. Was Lee was like, well, I mean, I'll do it, but I need to have a hand in it.
Mhm.
And I think for Lee, this probably extended his life. It gave him a purpose in his life, you know. And like you said, the college, I believe, was teaching like Latin and all of the things that people were beginning to stop studying.
Yeah.
And he wanted it to become a college that would be more useful.
Yes.
People could come back into the United States, learn how to be a good citizen again.
Mhm. Yes. Yes.
Was not perfect.
No, no.
But it became, like I said, probably his savior after the war. It gave him a few years, just giving him a purpose. Now,
Yeah.
with that being said, it was also stressful because he took on quite a bit of quite a few of the tasks himself, and he micromanaged, it sounded like, quite a few of them to make sure it was done just like he wanted. But to go
Mhm.
back to treason, I'm on the fence with you. I mean, if anybody should have been put away for treason, you're exactly right. Jefferson Davis, Robert E. Lee, those are your top two characters. And I would say Davis's administration, or several of them anyway, should be on that list as well.
Mhm.
But I also go back to Lincoln, and I'm actually, I have that other book that I just read in my head, Let 'Em Up Easy, because you cannot find a peaceful, there will not be a peaceful coexistence if there's hatred. And that was kind of the main message of that other book was
Yes.
you can't have hatred. You've got to find a way to get past the hatred.
Right.
And the war itself was enough. There was enough death there. Let's move past it.
Right. And I think Grant was of the same mind, you know, after the Appomattox surrender, and the Union armies were shooting off cannonades in celebration. He said, tell them to stop.
Yep.
They're our fellow countrymen again. So he was on the same page. I think I had mentioned this to you earlier, though, that there was like it was hypocritical. Like they hanged John Brown
Mm-hmm.
on treason because it was an armed insurrection. Okay, they hanged him.
Yep.
Robert E. Lee, and how many deaths did he cause?
Yep.
He didn't get the same treatment.
I agree.
So to me, it's like you got to apply it.
Yeah.
But
Now here's what I think Avalon's book, again, I know this is about the Lee biography, but Avalon's book was, it was talking about would hanging the people who are guilty of treason cause martyrs and then lead to future issues. And that's what happened with John Brown. He became a martyr of the movement.
that's right. You're right.
And then some people say that's what started the Civil War. That's what clicked it off. There's people that use that as the kind of the start of it.
Thank you for reminding me of that. Yes. I forgot about that aspect of Avalon's book, but
and there's different ways
yes,
to look at this. There's no right or wrong, but
you're
it's an
absolutely
interesting
right.
thing to ponder. So I don't know.
It's tough, but yeah, I see your point, and you're right. It did bring okay. Yeah, it did bring everyone kind of closer together. But I wish
biggest issue-
what's that?
My biggest issue with it is, in the end, when you look at Jefferson Davis and his funeral and the outpouring of support for him. That's my biggest issue with not putting him away for treason, is because in the end, he is so celebrated. It's one of the, at that point, if I remember correctly, at that point in American history, it was the largest funeral procession in all of American history.
For Jefferson Davis? I don't even.
For Jefferson Davis in New Orleans. I believe that's where that's where he died, and they had the funerals in New Orleans. And it was at that time the biggest funeral procession we'd ever had.
I tell you what.
And to me, that's where I have issues.
Mhm.
You're celebrating this guy who was, very pro-slavery. He led the Confederacy. I mean, he was the heart of the rebellion. But again, at that same time, the lost cause was very strong at that point.
And thanks. That leads me into like my last major diatribes or my last major just thing. I didn't learn anything too much new about the lost cause, except the fact, which is kind of big. I learned from Alan Guelzo that Lee kind of started signing up to it, kind of warmed up to that
Mhm.
thinking, over time. And then he, like you said earlier about Washington College, he could be very exclusionary of certain people, and he let in the people he liked, and he wouldn't grant acceptance to like sons and daughters of, or not daughters, but sons of Confederate generals who he felt did not do well on the battlefield. He kind of picked and chose who he wanted. And then he definitely didn't care to like go and visit Grant when he was president, when Grant, issued him very graciously, I think,
Mhm.
an invitation to meet him, and I think he did, but it was like very brief. And then he just left, I think then the insult of who was the greatest Union general, McClellan. I mean, that's just an outright insult.
Come on.
That's a ridiculous.
I could name a lot of them that are better than McClellan.
Yeah. So, but the lost cause, the big leaders of the lost cause were Jubal Early, John B. Gordon, who's a Georgian, and I'm trying to remember, I think Early was a Virginian. But anyway, they propound this thing that, this myth. And that's where all these statues came from eventually, because I always wondered as a child, because I lived in Georgia for a time when I was a young child. I didn't understand as I got to know about Civil War. I'm like, why? Okay, well, I live in the South. Okay, so I guess, but this person betrayed the country, the USA, the star, you know what I mean? The Stars and Stripes. Mm-hmm. You see that flag. It's just like, I don't understand that. And those things came like 20 years after. And in fact, in the beginning, Lee was like, let's not have memorials up. Let's not, And so I think he didn't know that a statue was made of him, right? In Richmond. And I mean, he died in 1869, 4 years after the Civil War ended. So he didn't live very long. So.
Yeah.
I don't know. So the lost cause. So I think that those people who promoted that have damaged the country in so many ways, because we're still dealing with the after effects of that.
Mm-hmm.
Very
much so. Very much so.
Yeah.
And
thank you, by the way, for earlier giving that nice snapshot of where we were at the end of towards the last days of the Civil War. That was a great history teacher presentation, and I loved it.
Sorry,
don't apologize. I probably am not giving
when I'm thinking about stuff to visualize all of that and how everything.
I love it. I probably was not giving enough background for everybody, but
you did fine.
Yeah. So Lee, a man of mystery and contradictions, and he went to his, he came home for dinner one night, right after a cold pounding rain. He was wet, sat down and had a stroke. Then he sank into a coma and passed away in his sleep.
Yep.
And you know what? A lot of the men who served underneath him and the people that died at his hands can't say the same. That's all I gotta say. I mean, I think Grant had it right. He's like, never were there more brave men. I'm screwing up the quote, but he basically said for a cause that was the worst cause on the face of the earth.
Mhm.
You fought for the worst cause on the face of the earth. So
That pretty much says it all.
yeah.
Yep. So,
So
well, Peg, I really appreciate, doing this buddy read and doing the video chat with me.
yeah, me too.
This has been fun.
Yep. And next time we're gonna be moving from Civil War to
World War One.
we're gonna do World War I, folks.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, but thanks to Alan Guelzo for giving us a really well written biography, fascinating insights. I had some that were just like, wow, that's new. I like that take. And then a couple of places where I disagreed, but
Yeah.
that's what I like. I like a book that kind of challenges you a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah, that was for me. That was a really good one to start off with, and it leaves me. I've got a couple, three more that are on my bookshelf at home on Lee that they've just been sitting there, and I just haven't went to them yet, and now I want to go to them and see what they said about him.
Yeah.
And also, even more importantly, and you'll appreciate this, I believe in July I'm going to tackle Ron Chernow's Grant because now I want to see the other side of it. I want to go back and see that other side. And I have done smaller look at Grant, but not a full scale biography on him. That'll be my first, big one on him.
Wow.
So I'm excited.
You should. Oh, I think do you like him right now? Because you're going to love him.
Yes, I do like him. I do.
Yeah,
So
it's going to
anyway,
be
that's where I'm at with my reading.
fantastic.
Just excited to see where, the paths this is going to take me. And this is a nice little stop off point and
Yep.
move from
All
there.
right. All right. Well, BookTube, we hope you enjoyed our, I don't know if I'll post it as 3 parts or 1. We'll see. But there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to unpack with Robert E. Lee and Alan Guelzo's presentation of him. So we hope you enjoyed our book chat.
Highly recommend it.
Yeah, highly recommend it. Please do pick up a copy. It's worth it, and a great bibliography. It gives you further reading and everything. So yeah, until next time, BookTube and Bill, I will see you next time.
See you.
All right. And what do you say? Happy what?
Happy reading.
All right. Bye.